Siti Rohayati is 58 years old. She sells street food in Manado, a city of 450,000 people in North Sulawesi, Indonesia. On the morning of April 2nd, 2026, she was setting up for the breakfast rush when the ground moved. Not the ordinary kind of tremor that Indonesians have learned to live with, the kind you feel in your feet and wait for it to stop. This was different. This lasted 10 to 20 seconds of violent, sustained shaking that threw items off shelves across homes and businesses, cut power in multiple neighborhoods across the city, and sent residents running into the streets from homes, offices, and hospitals. "I didn't know what to do," she told AFP. "I was just trying to save my family." I'm Tyler, and this is Crisis Alert Live. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because what happened in Indonesia this morning is one of the most powerful earthquakes to strike this region in years, and the situation is still developing. At approximately 6:48 in the morning local time, a magnitude 7.6 earthquake, measured by Indonesia's meteorology agency, BMKG, struck in the Northern Molucca Sea, between the Sulawesi and Maluku Island groups, near Ternate Island. The USGS measured the same quake at 7.4, and that variance between agencies is normal for a major earthquake. The instruments and methodologies differ slightly. What both agencies agree on is this: it was a powerful, shallow undersea earthquake in one of the most seismically volatile stretches of ocean on this planet, and it sent shockwaves across northern Indonesia within seconds of the rupture. The shaking lasted 10 to 20 seconds in Bitung City in North Sulawesi and in Ternate City in North Maluku. 20 seconds doesn't sound like much until you are standing in a building and the floor won't stop moving. 20 seconds of sustained magnitude 7.6. Shaking is enough to bring down unreinforced structures, to crack facades, to shatter glass across entire neighborhoods, and to permanently destabilize buildings that look intact from the outside, but are structurally compromised. Indonesia's Disaster Management Agency confirmed initial reports of light to severe damage across parts of Ternate, including a church and 2 houses. In Bitung, damage assessments were still underway, and authorities were warning that more damage reports were expected as teams reached neighborhoods that hadn't been fully checked yet. Remote villages in the region, smaller communities less connected to the main city infrastructure, had not yet been fully assessed, and the agency acknowledged that a clearer picture of the full damage would take time to emerge. 1 person was killed. A 70-year-old woman who died when a building collapsed in Manado. Indonesia's search and rescue agency confirmed the death. 1 confirmed fatality. That number carries a specific weight in a disaster where the scale of the earthquake and the density of the affected population could have made it far higher, and where the death toll, judging by how damage assessments typically unfold in the hours after a major quake, may not yet be complete. Wikipedia's earthquake entry also notes that the Siloam Hospital in Manado suffered serious structural damage, a detail that suggests the scope of what was hit extends beyond the initial reports of houses and a church. Abdul Muhari, spokesperson for Indonesia's National Disaster Agency, was direct with the public. Stay away from damaged buildings. The reason he had to say that specifically is that aftershocks are still coming. About 50 aftershocks were monitored by BMKG in the hours following the main event, the largest registering at magnitude 5.8. Another aftershock, tracked by the USGS, was measured at 6.2. That is not a minor tremor. A 6.2 magnitude earthquake on its own would be considered a significant seismic event in most parts of the world. When it arrives as an aftershock to a 7.6, its danger is amplified by the structural weakness it is hitting. Buildings that survived the main shock, damaged but standing, are the most vulnerable to the aftershocks that follow. It is not unusual for aftershocks to collapse structures that the main shock only cracked. This is why Muhari's warning was not bureaucratic caution. It was a direct survival instruction. The earthquake also triggered a tsunami warning. This is what a shallow undersea earthquake in this region automatically triggers. The Molucca Sea sits in one of the world's most dangerous zones for both seismic and tsunami hazard. BMKG Chief Teuku Faisal Fathani told reporters at a press conference that modelling indicated tsunami potential for waves between 0.5 and 3 meters high. When a scientist gives you a range like that, half a meter at the low end, 3 meters at the high end, you do not wait to find out where the actual wave lands. You move. And that is what people along the coast did. Tsunami waves were recorded at 5 monitoring locations. The highest reached 0.75 meters above normal tide levels in North Minahasa, in North Sulawesi. The tsunami warning was lifted later in the morning as monitoring confirmed no destructive wave had developed, and the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology confirmed there was no destructive threat to the Philippines, which sits north of the epicenter. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center also reported that any waves in Japan, Taiwan, Guam, Malaysia, and Palau would be minor. But the warning was real while it lasted. And the fact that the tsunami that arrived was smaller than the worst-case modeling is not a sign that the warning was wrong. It is a sign that the warning system worked. An AFP journalist based in Manado described what the shaking felt like from inside the city. It woke him. People were scrambling outside. A school nearby emptied immediately as pupils ran out. He noted the shaking persisted for quite long and said he did not see significant structural damage from his immediate location. A Bitung resident named Martin Mandagi described the experience simply, "We had just woken up and suddenly the earthquake hit. We all ran out of the house. The shaking was very strong." But Manado is about 300 kilometers west of Ternate by sea, and Bitung sits closer. The closer you get to the epicenter, the more violent the shaking was, and the damage in Ternate was more severe. Hospitals in the affected zone scrambled to move patients outdoors as a precaution. That detail tells you something about the speed and violence of what hit. When medical staff make the call to move patients out of a building during an earthquake, they are making a judgment that being outside is safer than being inside. That is not a decision medical workers make casually. Indonesia sits directly on what geologists call the Pacific Ring of Fire, the curved belt of seismic and volcanic activity that runs around the edges of the Pacific Ocean and is responsible for approximately 90% of the world's earthquakes. Indonesia is a vast archipelago of more than 280 million people, and its territory straddles major tectonic fault lines where the Australian plate, the Eurasian plate, and several smaller microplates all grind and collide. The Molucca Sea specifically is an extraordinarily active zone even by Indonesian standards. The region has produced powerful earthquakes repeatedly throughout recorded history, and local communities know the sound and feel of a major quake in a way that most people in other parts of the world do not. That familiarity with seismic risk is part of why the immediate response in Manado and Ternate was as organized as it was. People ran outside, hospitals moved patients, coastal communities moved toward higher ground. That institutional knowledge, learned through experience over generations, saves lives in the first minutes after a major quake. Authorities are continuing to gather information from multiple areas, particularly the more remote villages that are harder to reach and slower to report. The fuller picture of damage will take days to develop. The aftershocks, around 50 now confirmed, are making that assessment harder, because every time a 5.5 or a 5.8 hits the same region, assessment teams have to stop and account for new damage and new safety risks. The BMKG has urged the public to remain alert, to follow official guidance, and to stay away from damaged structures until those structures can be evaluated. What Indonesia experienced this morning is a reminder that for millions of people on this planet, the ground is not a stable thing. It is a surface balanced on plates that are always moving, always building stress, always capable of releasing energy in ways that no building code fully prepares for and no warning system can predict hours in advance. The only warning system that works for an earthquake is the one built over decades of seismic science, maintained by agencies like BMKG, and taken seriously by the governments and communities in the path of the shaking. This is Crisis Alert Live. We will keep tracking updates from northern Indonesia as damage assessments continue and aftershock activity is monitored. Drop a comment below. Wherever you are watching from, we want to hear from you. The ground in Manado is still moving. Siti Rohayati and her family made it out. The count is still being taken.